Good morning. My name is Maia Carrera, and today we'll be learning about the moss life cycle. Now, it's important to note that before we start this, moss is considered non-vascular, and so this life cycle is going to be a little bit different than a regular plant's life cycle. As you can see on the diagram, it's all listed and it's numbered 1 to 7. I'm going to go and explain each of these different steps. But first, I'm going to go and do a quick rundown of why these two parts are different colors. So as you can see here, this is blue. This is where we're going to start at. And this is because these cells here are considered haploid, while the cells down here are diploid. And so what's going to occur right here in step 1 is meiosis, and then what's going to occur at step 5 is fertilization. We're going to get more onto that later in the lecture, but I feel this will help a quick understanding of trying to understand what's happening in this diagram and such. So here we start with step 1, and right here is the capsule, and at the capsule, it's going to release spores. And as I said before, this is because of meiosis. Now, once meiosis occurs, these spores are going to develop as haploid cells. And once they reach a certain maturity, they're going to start to grow. Now, it looks a little bit different up here and this second line because they actually end up dividing and growing as male and female. Now, the male is called the antheridium, and the female is called the archegonium. It's important to not mix these up. Yes, they both start with A. Try not to mix these up because both of them have very important parts in this life cycle. Now, it's a little bit easier to describe the female part first, and then later we're going to go and get into the male antheridium part. So here we have the archegonium, and at this point, the archegonium is going to go and develop the egg, and this egg is essentially just going to lay and wait for any sperm to come. And while the archegonium is waiting for a sperm to fertilize its egg, we're going to go into the male antheridium. Now, the male antheridium is actually really interesting because how fertilization occurs is not very common for plants as of today. Now, the way that this fertilization occurs used to happen several thousands of years ago, but plants have adapted in such a way that the fertilization process does not have to be as complicated. So you may be asking, what is this fertilization process? Why is it so different? What is happening here? And that's easy to say. Right here, as you can see, the antheridium, and there's a raindrop, and then there's sperm. So the antheridium is actually going to go and develop these sperm, and then because these sperm are flagellated, which means that they're covered by flagella, they're going to actually be able to swim inside raindrops or any other form of water, and they're actually going to go and swim inside the archegonium. Now, of course, you can assume now why plants have adapted to stop fertilization process to be like this, and that's because if weather were to go and dry up, or let's say it was too windy, and so the wind blew all the raindrops away from the female archegonium, then that would mean that there are no moss being produced because there are no sperm being able to fertilize the eggs. But because of how resilient moss are, and due to the fact that they also live in very wet, moist areas, this isn't too much of a problem. All right, and then another important point to note is that when you go and see moss and you look at them, this right here, the antheridium and the archegonium, that's actually what you are going to see. And it's what most people consider to be moss, but moss is very difficult to see unless sperm has been released or the archegonium has been fully developed. So now we're going to go and get into step 5, and this is, as I said before, the process of fertilization. So now we're moving from haploid, and because we were combining the sperm and the egg, we are now going on to diploid. So as you can see here, the egg has been fertilized within the archegonium, and now it is considered a zygote. And now as the zygote develops, it's going to become an embryo. And then here in step 6, this is really interesting. It's the young sporophyte that's actually growing out of the archegonium. And now once the young sporophyte has fully developed out of the archegonium, we're going to get these little brown bits. And once those brown bits release spores, we're going to start the cycle all over again through meiosis. And so I personally feel it's a little bit easier to go and see what these brown bits are in the next slide. So we're going to go there first, and then we're going to go back, and I'll go and discuss the whole cycle all together. All right, so as you can see, we have this little capsule here, and that's also called the sporangium. Now that's where the spores are actually going to be released at. Right here, this is called the seta, and it connects the capsule to the sporangium. And where the specific spot where the sporangium and the seta meet, that is considered the foot. So back to the life cycle. First, we have meiosis that occurs, and then spores are released, and then we have the antheridium, which is going to go and produce sperm, and then we have the archegonium, which is going to develop the egg, and then because the sperm are flagellated, they're going to go and swim through raindrops, and they're going to go and swim into the archegonium. And then here we have fertilization, which occurs, and so we're moving from haploid into diploid. And then we have the zygote fertilizing within the archegonium, and then it develops into an embryo, and then this embryo is going to grow into a young sporophyte, and then this young sporophyte is going to go and develop mature sporophyte, which is the capsule, the seta, and the foot. And within the capsule, we're going to go and have spores released through meiosis. And this process is going to repeat as many times as needed until the moss that we are looking at ends up dying. And so now we're going to go on to the next slide. And, what are we looking at? What is this? As I said before, this is the capsule, this is the seta, and a little bit below this, that's going to be the foot. And in this process, what is occurring is fertilization. Now it's going to be a step right before meiosis will occur and the spores will be released, and then the antheridium and the archegonium are going to go and release the sperm and the egg so that fertilization can occur. But that's all. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and if you have any questions, let me know. Thank you so much.